Welcome to Latin American Literature for the 2020 and 2021 fall and spring terms. The goals for this course, writ macro, are to prepare students for the 2 English classes that they're going to take in college, no matter what they end up studying. They're going to have a freshman composition course. They're also going to have a writing intensive course, most likely an English elective necessary to satisfy their general education requirements. So we are hitting those skills through imitating a writing intensive English elective that would meet a general education requirement by moving through that sort of course content at about 40%, 40 to 45% of the speed they would encounter in a typical undergraduate course. So we move through 2 major works, do 4 papers and a final, and engage with a number of supporting texts. In a similar course over 15 weeks, they would probably move through 5 major texts, as well as supporting stuff. So we are looking to expose students to those skills through doing that work, but at a slower pace. So as you can see here, the big focus is on 20th century Latin American literature. We do some other stuff, but we are focusing very hard on the Latin American boom from 1959 to 1974. Both of our 2 major texts come from the boom, given the constrictions in terms of time. This is a semester-length course, so we are not able to move too far afield in the realm of Latin American literature. There is some other stuff we look at, but we're focusing on the most important cultural moment in Latin American literary life, which is that 15-year window. And within that, we're doing a lot of work on writing. So we spend a great deal of time on writing skills, scaffolding writing skills, learning how to revise our own writing, learning what good writing looks like. And while reading does not take a back seat per se, the expectation is that students are seniors. They should be fairly well equipped for the reading. We can always revisit skills as needed, but the primary emphasis is on undergraduate level writing skills and taking our time to develop those so we're ready to roll when we're sitting in those seats next year, 2, 3, 4 years from now. What we move through is centered around, in the first quarter and for the third quarter for spring term students, the death of Artemio Cruz, and the second and fourth quarter, respectively, 100 Years of Solitude. For the first quarter, we move through an introduction to the Spanish conquest, the Mesoamerican empires, and generally try to help students understand what is the condition of Latin America as the 20th century begins. Then we do about 2 weeks of historical study, working primarily from Stephen Rabe's The Killing Zone, to understand the immediate historical background for the boom and what's going on in the tumult that dominates Latin American nations in that time frame. What is it and why is it happening? The death of Artemio Cruz is an extended metaphor for the Mexican Revolution, which loosely spans 1910 to 1939 as a pretty fraught period. So Artemio Cruz himself is a one-man metaphor for the nation of Mexico and the Mexican Revolution itself. So we are working with those themes of that stem from revolution, and how is it that those who overthrow a tyrant themselves end up becoming tyrants, which is at the heart of what the novel is doing. In the second quarter, the historical context is much the same. The books are only written 3 years apart. What we are working to understand is the dominant genre of writing in the boom, which is magical realism, and the foremost example of Latin American magical realism is 100 Years of Solitude. So we are working to understand the intellectual history of that artistic movement. What are its goals? What are its characteristics? Where does it come from? before we see it in action, as it can be a bit of a stylistic, it can induce some stylistic whiplash for students who've never been exposed to it before. And so this is easily the most seminal work of Latin American literature, and it encompasses everything under the sun. So we take our time, work through that, work to unpack all of the things going on there, and then digest it with a couple of different writing tasks. In terms of policies for the course, these are all in the syllabus. I just want to hit 2 highlights. Most important is the communication piece, especially in the hybrid and online learning arrangement. I am very happy to be flexible with family situations, work situations, sports commitments. I just need students to communicate early. So anything you can do to help your son manage a planner, be aware of his schedule, to reach out for help and for extra time when necessary would be greatly appreciated, and would really help him to gain those sort of executive functioning skills necessary for him to succeed as he enters adulthood here over the next few years. Closely related to that is the academic integrity issue. We have 3 major tech platforms for the class: Remind, Moodle, Turnitin. Anything involving original student writing goes through Turnitin. I find that this is very helpful in terms of warehousing and curating student work, and also creating that backbone structure for academic integrity. Something you should know, and I always tell students, is that if a student has backed himself into a corner where that's a temptation to plagiarize, that the best thing to do is to send me an email, ask to meet with me, and fall on his sword. I would much rather have a student turn work in late with a grade cap than to plagiarize, end up with a 0, and be subject to honors council proceedings. It's a bad habit to get in. The stakes for it at the undergraduate level are quite high. And so it's just not a situation students should be putting themselves in. It can almost always be solved by more communication and more planning. And so with regard to that major issue, I work very hard to help students master their schedule and improve their communication strategies so that they don't find themselves in a situation where that seems like a good option. The Zoom policies for this class, the new piece of tech, are the same as the schools. So to be counted as present, you need to be upright, in dress code, and have your camera on. I am sure we will run into some tech hiccups as the term goes along. Students know, and so should you, after this, that I can always answer questions via email, that if something goes wrong and a student isn't hearing or isn't able to see what they need to see, we can always solve that. So it's never a crisis situation. A student's never going to be negatively impacted in terms of their grade as a consequence of a technological difficulty. So if you have any needs that arise, please email me or call me here. If you leave me a voicemail, please make sure to include your number so I can return your call at my earliest convenience. For email, I'll always respond within 24 hours. If you email me late on a Friday, I will get back to you by Sunday afternoon. So I am here. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out at any time. So I look forward to getting to know your sons and helping to prepare them for this next step.